Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today I'm going to be discussing an area of child development that is both deeply personal and it's actually often overlooked in academic settings. And the reason for that is because it's spiritual development in children, particularly on this one, ages 6 to 12. This is a formative season in a child's life where they begin to make sense of the world around them. So they're not just looking to make sense academically or socially, but also spiritually. This stage is marked by a lot of wonder. They're curious. They're trying to form an identity, and it matters greatly for their overall growth as human beings. So, why spiritual development matters? As children enter middle childhood, we see them shift from an egocentric perspective focused mainly on their own needs and wants to more of a broader understanding of their community, including what's fair, so fairness and belonging. Spiritual development in this age group is about more than learning rules or memorizing verses. It's about forming meaning, finding belonging, and exploring purpose. The importance of these years is very, very often understated, but they are pivotal because what happens here can lay the foundation for a lifelong relationship with faith, values, and moral reasoning, of course. So, again, it's a critical stage for identity, morality, and worldview. And we'll get further into shifting from concrete to abstract thought and spirituality and the impact of emotional well being and resilience as we go forward into our theories and frameworks. So, to get a better understanding of what we just talked about and we're introducing, we need to look at theories and stages or theories and frameworks that will contribute to that spirituality that is so important. To understand this better, we can lean on several major theorists like Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget places children ages 6 to 12 in the concrete operational stage. Here, children begin to think logically and systemically, but their thinking is still so very literal. They struggle with abstract concepts, but they can handle concrete examples and cause and effect reasoning. Erik Erikson's theory identifies this as the stage of industry versus inferiority. Children are asking, am I competent? Do I measure up to others? Am I as cool as they are? They're starting to get into that stage where they're noticing things outside of themselves. Their successes and their failures here strongly shape their self esteem. James Fowler adds another layer with his stages of faith, describing children in this range as being in the mythic literal stage. This means they interpret stories, religious teachings, and spiritual practices in a very, very literal way. Miracles, parables, or rituals are understood exactly as they are presented. Taken together, these frameworks serve to remind us that spiritual development is closely linked with a child's cognitive and their emotional growth. Since we are talking the realm of spiritual development and moral identity or forming those morals, we definitely want to remember um, Kohlberg, Lawrence Kohlberg. So, Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development provides another important perspective. Children at this age are generally operating in the conventional level of morality. Their decisions are often guided by rules, laws, and um, a desire for approval, believe it or not. They see fairness and justice in clear terms. However, this is also the time when empathy and conscience begin to emerge more and more strongly. They start to understand how others feel, and this ability to take another's perspective is critical in shaping compassion and moral responsibility. This intersection of growing empathy and rule based morality creates both opportunities and challenges for spiritual formation. And I just have to insert here that this is also why this is one of my favorite ages. I like early childhood as children are growing, but about the time they get to about 6 to 12 years old, especially, because all this time we're creating such a foundation for them to grow into a kind, compassionate, a moral and empathetic person. And I always say later on, there's hope, but it's rewiring the brain more than it is instilling this in the beginning and something that they grow into instead of have to rearrange later. So, yes, Kohlberg and the theorists and how it all applies to a child's spiritual understanding and growth is very crucial and very interesting once you dig into it. Okay, from theory to practice. John Santrock reminds us that children don't just know theory, they live it through interactions. Piaget described how children in the concrete operational stage think very literally. And I've seen this in my own classroom when a child takes every word of a Bible story or a storybook as fact without yet grasping and understanding symbolism. Erickson's stage of industry versus inferiority also comes alive here. When a child succeeds at memorizing a verse or leading a prayer, you can see their confidence just soar. So, moving from theory to practice is about bridging that gap. How do we guide children in ways that fit their developmental stage? That's what we'll look at next. Okay, so protective factors. This is where children are going to start to understand that God can guide them, and they start looking at how spiritual practices give them strength. And we start to see who ties into this and who helps these children grow into safety. So, most importantly, family influence remains the most powerful factor in a child's spiritual development. Children model what they see. If parents prioritize prayer, worship, and service, children absorb these practices as normal parts of life. Daily rituals like reading scripture together at the table, praying before bedtime, or attending weekly worship services form the foundation of faith. Importantly, it is not only formal practices, but also everyday actions, kindness, honesty, generosity, those, fruit of the spirit type things that communicate that faith looks like in practice or what it looks like in practice. When faith is woven into your daily life, it becomes natural rather than forced. Okay, as we discussed, family and faith is very crucial. And as an older adult with two children that are in college now and starting out in their young adult life, this is something I cannot stress enough that family is so crucial in forming their morality and their spiritual life. So, here we stress that family is the primary influence and children will model what they see. So, as they see you and your practice and what you do, they're going to model and turn around and do that for themselves and towards other people. So, by this stage, peers take on a stronger role as well in shaping beliefs and behavior. Friends influence children's values, sense of belonging, and even their questions about faith. This is why environments such as youth groups, church camps, or even school communities can be so meaningful. They give children opportunities to share experiences of faith, develop accountability, and form supportive friendships. At the same time, negative peer influence can challenge or undermine spiritual growth. So, that circle of friends, supportive peer environments are critical. It is very important to foster that. And they will also shape how they want to explore and who they want to become. Okay, so this is an extension, and I just wanted to again reiterate how much of a model you are, not only to your own children, but to your students, to your nieces, your nephews, your community. Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, so that even when he is old, he will not depart from it. I am seeing that play out in so many ways with my family and my students, and how much their own self efficacy is strengthened when they have this village to raise them and to instill this spirituality in them. Again, early childhood and 6 to 12 is such a meaty time to instill this spiritual realm. So, I've actually done a lot of research on this over the years. And if you're interested in really delving into this anymore, I highly recommend Smith and Denton, Religion and Identity, and how it delves into how religion helps you form who you are and to identify um, what is important to you. And then also, King and Boyatz's spirituality is linked to hope, and without hope, there's nothing. So it ties in that whole thing and teaches children to hope, and it helps you know how to instill that and model that for them as we discussed. And then Hardy talks about spiritual practices predict pro-social behavior. So as they're learning to be spiritual and self-disciplined and all the things that go into a spiritual healthy practice, you can begin to see what they are going to lean on socially, how their positive behavior and is going to develop. Okay, so Santrock 2019 emphasizes that research only becomes meaningful when it helps practice. We can read Fowler's stages of faith development and Kohlberg's levels of morality all day, but it doesn't translate into strategies at home and in the classroom. It's just words. For example, I remember one child who loved science experiments but had deep, deep questions about God. Research told me this was typical. Children at this age ask why constantly. Why? Application meant creating a safe space where we could test ideas, talk openly, and connect their curiosity to faith. That's where growth happens, and we see growth happening. So, as we move forward, think about this question. What does it look like to turn research into daily faith practices? So here we just really want to emphasize and reiterate the psychological benefits of spirituality and a spiritual walk. Again, all the theorists play into this, and this is again where moral reasoning begins to deepen. Spiritual practices support emotional regulation. And as a teacher in a special education and behavior unit for really a good 6 years now, um, emotional regulation is so important, and a spiritual walk has been very crucial and evident in children who have been more self-regulated as opposed to the ones that are not regulated and can't control their emotions and are more aggressive or even violent towards their staff and teachers and peers. So again, these spiritual practices, young, 6 to 12, earlier actually, support emotional regulations. And adults should nurture curiosity with respect. Respectful. Children deserve respect. And curiosity is wonder. We should be amazed by that. So respect your children and your students. Okay, so practical strategies. What does all of this mean for parents, teachers, and spiritual leaders? What are the implications of this spiritual walk? It just simply means we must be intentional. We must intentionally cultivate environments where faith is modeled and questions are encouraged. Support those questions. Teaching through stories, art, music can connect so deeply with children at this stage. Create opportunities for them to serve. Let them help in church. Let them be lunch helpers. Let them have jobs within the classroom. Let them assist people in the sanctuary, in the fellowship hall. Teach them to be respectful of their elders, that kind of thing. Sometimes creativity and humor are just part of the process. And as administrators always say, remember your why, make that connection. This is where that plays in. Okay, so this is where it gets real for anyone, not just our 6 to 12-year-olds in their spiritual realm. So Children in this age group inevitably encounter challenges. Their natural curiosity leads to questions like, why do bad things happen? Or how do I know what's true? These are profound theological questions for anyone, which even adults sometimes struggle to find answers. In addition, the cultural environment, social media, television, video games, we know these often and always present conflicting values that can confuse children. Rather than shutting down questions, adults need to create safe spaces for dialogue where questions are welcomed and explored. Silencing or ignoring a child's doubt can unintentionally push them away from faith, while honest, compassionate guidance can anchor them more firmly. Okay, from challenges to hope. Children's faith is not without struggle. They ask the big questions. Why do bad things happen? Why doesn't God always answer my prayers? Sandrock notes that around ages 6 to 12, children's growing empathy means they start to wrestle with fairness and suffering in real ways. I once had a student whose pet died, and he quietly asked, is my dog in heaven? In that moment, theory couldn't give me the answer. It couldn't provide comfort for this kiddo, but giving him hope could. By affirming God's love and what I call the rainbow bridge, I created a space for lament and brought the conversation back to a place of grace. That's what this transition is about. Even in challenges, there is hope, and hope is what sustains spiritual development. Okay, while I was working on this, I had to bring this out. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're teachers, we know this backwards and forwards, but I want to remind, without meeting the proper needs related to our flesh and our fleshly needs and our humanity, then we will not be effective in modeling and glorifying spiritualism in these children. If we can't meet their needs from the bottom up, then they will never get to a place of loving and belonging. They'll never get to their self-esteem. And spirituality actually fosters and grows in that area at the top, self-actualization. So if we can't get the kiddos from the bottom to the top, then we will fail with a strong spiritual model. Meet those physical needs, meet them where they are. Okay, so in conclusion, middle childhood 6 to 12 is a foundational stage for spiritual development. We've got to build that foundation. Psychology and theology affirm children as meaning makers. Faith will shape their identity, their resilience, and their morality going forward. Okay, so when I think of bringing it all together, I picture children holding hands in a circle, surrounded by families, teachers, and communities of faith. All the pieces we've talked about, Piaget's logic, Erikson's confidence, Fowler's faith stories, Kohlberg's sense of fairness, merge with prayer, worship, and daily life. So, another personal story. I once had a child in my class who struggled academically but just thrived when he was asked to lead the group in a prayer. That simple moment showed me what it looks like when psychology and faith unite. His need for competence from Erikson was met, and his faith identity grew stronger. So this slide serves to remind us spiritual development is holistic. It is academic, emotional, moral, and spiritual, all tied together in Christ. So quickly again, here are my references. If you're interested in following up on any of these topics, if you have small children or students and you are blessed enough to work in a private setting where you can discuss or study more in this realm of spirituality, then I highly encourage this. I also encourage you to study from Apologetics Press. They have a lot of resources to help tie into your spiritual walk as you raise these kiddos and you teach them. Okay, Thank you so much for letting me present this to you. This was fun for me to research. It's a topic that's always been very near and dear to me. And I just want to say have a blessed week. Have a great week. And I wish you all the best as you go forward with your studies and your teaching and your further careers.